My next guest is Congressman Bruce Westerman from Arkansas. He's the ranking member on the Natural Resources Committee and a sponsor. He actually introduced the Trillion Trees Act. Congressman Westerman, it's great to see you. When I first heard of the Trillion Trees Act, I was actually in Davos, Switzerland. I, just was up there. Sorry, folks. And I thought it was billion. But, I mean, trillion is a big deal. I'm just interested in how that's going.
Yeah, well, Steve, first off, thank you for hosting this forum and for allowing me to be part of it and talk about things that are very important to me and I think very important to the country. And, you mentioned being in Switzerland, and the Trillion Trees Initiative actually came from a study that came out of Davos that said that if we planted 1 trillion trees around the planet, that we could sequester 2/3 of the man-made carbon emitted since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. That's over 200 gigatons of carbon. And with me being the only forester in Congress, this is right up my alley. I've always known that trees are the largest spread, most economical, best tool that we have to actually pull carbon out of the atmosphere. And with the carbon levels above 400 parts per million, there's nothing that can take that carbon out of the atmosphere like a good, healthy forest can do. And there's so many benefits to it outside of air quality. We get water quality. We get benefits for rural economies. The table that this computer's sitting on that's made out of wood, it's got carbon that was stored in that wood a long time ago that had been pulled from the atmosphere. And as long as this table is here, that carbon is securely sequestered inside the table. And that goes for new buildings. In my home state of Arkansas, Walmart is building their new corporate headquarters, which would be more like a college campus for 15,000 employees. They're building that out of wood. And it may seem contrary to thinking, but to have healthy forests, you have to have healthy markets.
Right.
It's markets that keep forest land forested. So that's something I'm working on with the Trillion Trees Act, and we're getting ready to file a new version of it this week.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm personally interested in that, so we'll keep a line on that open. But today's session, this track in our 3-day summit on the energy equation, and I've tried to tell people that in this 3 days we're gonna it's like a foreign policy. We're going to discuss the energy picture as it is and the energy and climate picture as we might want it to be. And I'm interested, and it's become a very political tug of war over some elements of this, Keystone Pipeline or how we get this. But, my hope today is that we have people listen to each other, that can hear each other and come in. So as you approach natural resources and think about the question and the stress out there, are there elements in this debate that you think we can move that make the nation and country healthier, keep the economy going, and deal with the realities of energy, in which we do have renewables coming online, but it's still going to be a tiny proportion of our overall energy usage and supply in this country?
Yeah, so my undergraduate degree is in engineering, so I love to solve problems. And as we look at energy and as we look at the environment, we talk about sustainability, but I think we've got to do more than sustainability. Sustainability is just status quo, if you will. But I think what Americans want and deserve is a cleaner, safer, and healthier environment. And we also want to have reliable energy and affordable energy. And I think all of that's possible, mainly because of the innovation and the ingenuity that we have. So my vision is to look more at how we make the fuels that we've got cleaner, how we make our energy systems more reliable, how we look at all forms of energy. And, I think going forward that nuclear energy has to be part of the debate. It's obviously zero carbon. We could put 12,000 additional megawatts of hydropower on existing dams in this country, which is, again, zero carbon. There's opportunities to use wind and solar during the day to create forms of energy that can become liquid transportation fuels, that can become storage systems to pull that energy back out at other times. So we need to really take an all above inclusive approach to energy, and we need to rely on our inventions and ingenuity, because I think if we really want to affect global climate, we can't do that through a more of a political environmentalism where we're trying to regulate things out of existence here in the U.S. We have to be the leaders that produces the newest, cleanest, most economical energy sources, so that when developing countries are looking at what kind of energy systems to put in, they say, we're going to put in what the Americans did because it's the most economical, and the side benefit of that, it's also what's best for the environment. So I think we can have a healthy environment and a strong economy at the same time, and actually the two go hand in hand. I don't think you can have one without the other.
Councilor Westerman, I know that you were not thrilled with the president's decision on the Keystone Pipeline, and maybe some other parts of his portfolio. You may have some differences. But if they were to reach out to you and said, we need to call Bruce Westerman, natural resources, knows forests, engineer, and they were going to reach out to you and say, we want to be credible, we want to find a way forward together that is not posturing but real in terms of getting to cleaner energy solutions, but ones that work for the economy, what would be some elements of a smart strategy for the Biden team to take?
I would welcome that call, and I would say let's argue about the facts and the science. Let's look at what really works and what doesn't work. The reason I oppose what happened on the Keystone Pipeline is because we know that pipelines are the safest, most energy efficient way to transport fuels. We know that we need those heavy crudes in our refineries in the Gulf. And if we don't get them from our friends in Canada, then we will likely be shipping them across the ocean in methods of transportation that aren't nearly as safe. I have constituents in my district who are working on the pipeline who had great jobs, who lost those jobs. I went and sat down with them, and I was surprised to find out that all the energy that was going to be used to move the oil in the pipeline was being done with renewable sources of energy. So all the pumping stations were either wind or solar or some other form of renewables. And these workers were actually learning how to build renewable energy systems while they were building the pipeline. So it makes no sense for the economy or the environment to shut down that pipeline. And I think there are things we could work on, like healthy forests, on promoting and incentivizing sustainable building. We have a housing shortage in our country, and we've got an opportunity to do more to sequester carbon by the way we build in our country and by the way we operate and maintain buildings than we actually do with transportation fuels. But all the focus seems to be on petroleum-based transportation fuels, and also on how we generate electricity. But there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of common ground, and I would love to have that conversation with the administration.
Let me just ask finally, another part of this discussion, I'm trying to sort of de-silo parts of this equation to, various degrees of success and failure. But one of them, I talked to a lot of my friends in the climate advocacy world, is that the United States got a lot of other intangible benefits from energy independence, that its dependence previously on different foreign sources of oil and gas really complicated the picture here. It limited this. And so there are a lot of elements of this that are synergistic. And now we're in a much more, I just talked to somebody from Pennsylvania. I didn't realize that Pennsylvania is the second biggest gas producer in the United States, huge global exporter of this. And so there's in this. Is there a literacy and an awareness among Republicans and Democrats in the House about that dimension of energy and climate, that the stakes have changed for the United States, that we have more options because we're less dependent, say, on the Middle East and Latin America?
Yeah, and I think all that plays into a cleaner, safer, and healthier environment, along with a robust economy here. And then, obviously, if you're not dependent upon a foreign energy producer, you're going to have a lot more options than you do if you are dependent. I've traveled to Eastern Europe, and a lot of the times when we sit down for meetings, one of the first things that's pulled out, this was obviously before the pandemic, they all wanted to either be a member of NATO or they wanted to show us how they were going to get to 2% of their GDP, for defense, as NATO membership required. The second thing was typically a discussion on how do we get U.S. gas and U.S. energy to Eastern Europe so that they weren't dependent upon on Russia for their energy needs. And when we become dependent on foreign nations for our energy, when we've got all of it here, a lot of people around the world, I think, look at us and say, "What are you doing?" you've got the ability to supply your own needs for energy. We know what it's like to be at the beck and call of an unfriendly government for our energy. So we've got to apply more common sense and look at the big picture and all the benefits of having energy independence. And that doesn't mean energy independence just with fossil fuels. We need to develop all these different forms of energy so that we can meet our own needs. We only produce 0.5% of the uranium that we use here in the U.S., and Russia is one of the largest suppliers of that now. But we've got enough uranium to meet all of our needs if we would just go mine that uranium and use it.
Well, listen, Congressman Bruce Westerman of Arkansas, I love your tweets. I'm just doing this. You've got one tweet that says, "Happy Arkansas Arbor Day. It's no secrets that I love trees and their potential to help our environment through carbon capture. That's why I introduced the Trillion Tree Initiative." I'm sure you know my friend Mark Benioff of Salesforce, who was also very involved in it. So we'll have to, he's a very green guy, but I mean, I think that we could, get an interesting conversation on the Trillion Tree Initiative with Mark and you and some others. It would be a very interesting conversation. But thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Mark's a great guy. I'd love to have that conversation.
Thank you very much.